The world had never seen anything like it. Rome was not just a city, it was an idea. Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. For 500 years it had been a republic, a government of the people, by the people, built on a delicate balance of power between elected magistrates, a revered Senate, and popular assemblies. This system, guided by the Mos Maiorum, the unwritten code of ancestral traditions, had propelled a small city-state to mastery of the known world. Its legions marched across continents, its laws shaped civilizations, and its Senate echoed with the voices of free men debating the fate of millions. It was a system that had weathered foreign invasions, internal strife, and the pressures of immense expansion. It seemed eternal. But that time was ending. The very success that had made Rome great was now poisoning it from within. Rome was dying. Not from a foreign enemy at the gates, but from a sickness in its own heart. The foundations of this great republic were cracking. Power, once shared, was now being hoarded by the few. A new class of super-rich aristocrats, enriched by conquest, controlled vast estates worked by armies of slaves, driving the common Roman farmer off his land and into the city. The city itself was a study in stark contrasts. While magnificent temples and grand public buildings reached for the heavens, their shadows concealed a darker reality. The streets below teemed with a restless, impoverished populace. This volatile urban mob, dispossessed and dependent on the state's grain dole, became a powerful and unpredictable tool for ambitious politicians, sowing the seeds of resentment and instability. The very principles that had made Rome strong, duty, honor, service to the state, were being replaced by a far more corrosive force, personal ambition. Politics became a blood sport, a zero-sum game for ultimate power. The Republic's vast territory, stretching from Spain to Syria, was no longer a shared inheritance, but a chessboard for powerful men. The political arena fractured into two main factions. The Optimates, the best men, were the conservative faction of the Senate. They sought to preserve the power of the aristocracy and uphold the traditional authority of the Senate against the will of the popular assemblies and the ambition of individual generals. Opposing them were the populares, the men of the people. These politicians, often aristocrats themselves, championed the cause of the common citizen, proposing land reforms, debt relief, and using the power of the people's assemblies to bypass the Senate. While their rhetoric spoke of popular sovereignty, their methods often served their own rise to power. In the hallowed halls of the Senate, the air was thick with mistrust. Debate gave way to demagoguery. Corruption was rampant, with provincial governorships seen not as a duty, but as an opportunity for extortion and personal enrichment. The crisis had been building for generations. It was the general Gaius Marius who first broke the ultimate taboo. By recruiting landless citizens into the army and promising them land and retirement benefits, he created a new kind of Roman soldier, one whose loyalty was not to the Senate and people of Rome, but to his general. His rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, took this a step further. In 88 BC, he did the unthinkable. He marched his legions on Rome itself, seizing the city by force. The precedent was set. The army was now the final arbiter of political disputes. After winning a brutal civil war, Sulla declared himself dictator and unleashed the proscriptions, state-sanctioned murder lists. His enemies were hunted down, their property confiscated, their families destroyed. It was a reign of terror that purged the Republic of a generation of leaders and left a deep, unhealable scar on the Roman psyche. Sulla had tried to restore the Republic, but he had only shown how to destroy it. Senators, once the stoic guardians of the state, had become warlords in their own right, commanding personal armies loyal only to them. Greed, corruption, and endless civil wars tore the Republic apart. Political gangs like those of Clodius Pulcher and Titus Milo turned the streets of Rome into a battleground. Civil wars, once unthinkable, had become a recurring nightmare. Roman legions, the very instrument of the empire's creation, were now turned against each other as brother fought brother for the ambitions of a powerful few. The rule of law had collapsed, giving way to the rule of the sword. The Republic was a hollow shell, its ideals broken, its institutions paralyzed. It was a world ripe for a man who could navigate its treacherous currents, a man with the audacity to see the chaos not as an end, but as a beginning. From this crucible of violence and ambition rose one man who would seize destiny itself. In the dying light of the Roman Republic, a century of civil strife had bled the state near to death. The old ways were crumbling, eroded by the relentless tides of personal ambition, greed, and factional violence. From this swirling, decadent chaos, one figure would rise, a man whose ambition was as vast as the Republic itself. A man whose name would not just be remembered, but would echo through eternity, Gaius Julius Caesar. He was born in 100 BC into the Julian clan, an ancient patrician family that traced its lineage back to the goddess Venus herself. Yet, for all their divine ancestry, the Julii were not among Rome's wealthiest or most powerful families. His father had served as a praetor, a respectable but not stellar career. His real political inheritance came through his Aunt Julia's marriage to Gaius Marius, the great general and seven-time consul who had championed the cause of the and the popular faction. This connection placed the young Caesar firmly in a dangerous political camp. He learned early that his noble name alone would not be enough to navigate the treacherous currents of Roman politics. He would need something more. His first taste of the brutal political reality came early. Through his Marian connections, he was nominated for the prestigious post of the High Priest of Jupiter. But this honor was a gilded cage, bound by ancient taboos that would have barred him from a military or political career. Fate intervened in the form of Lucius Cornelius Sulla. When Sulla marched on Rome and declared himself dictator, he unleashed a bloody purge of his Marian enemies. Caesar, as Marius's nephew and the son-in-law of Sulla's enemy Cinna, was a prime target. Sulla ordered Caesar to divorce his wife, Cornelia. Caesar, in a stunning act of defiance for a man so young, refused. Stripped of his priesthood, his wife's dowry, and his own inheritance, he was forced to flee the city, hiding in the Sabine hills with a bounty on his head. Only the intervention of powerful friends, who pleaded that Sulla should beware the Marius in this boy, saved his life. This early brush with death taught him a vital lesson. In Rome, politics was not a game. It was a matter of survival. Seeking safety and military experience abroad, Caesar's journey was again interrupted, this time by Cilician pirates. Captured and held for ransom, his captors demanded 20 talents of silver. According to the historian Plutarch, Caesar laughed in their faces, declaring he was worth at least 50. For 38 days, he was their prisoner, but he acted more like their commander. He composed speeches and poems, demanding they listen. He joined their games, and he repeatedly, cheerfully, promised them that once he was free, he would return and have them all crucified. The pirates thought it a grand joke. After his ransom was paid, Caesar raised a small fleet, hunted down his former captors, and, true to his word, crucified them. It was a stunning display of audacity, ruthlessness, and the absolute certainty of his own will. Returning to Rome, Caesar needed a platform to build his name. He threw himself into the public sphere, using the courts as his stage. He undertook the high-profile prosecution of Gnaeus Cornelius Dolabella, a former governor notorious for extortion. Though he ultimately lost the case against the powerful aristocrat, his eloquent and aggressive oratory won him widespread acclaim. He was honing his skills of persuasion, building a reputation not just as a brilliant speaker, but as a champion of the people, willing to take on the corrupt elite. But building a political career in Rome required more than just talent. It required money. Vast, staggering sums of it. As he climbed the The ladder of political offices, Caesar spent lavishly. He was elected military tribune, then quaestor, and in 65 BC, as aedile, he was responsible for public works and games. He seized the opportunity, staging magnificent gladiatorial contests and theatrical shows, rebuilding public colonnades, and ensuring the city's grain supply was plentiful. The people loved him for it, but his generosity came at a terrifying cost. He was borrowing heavily, plunging himself into a level of debt that would have crushed any ordinary man. His primary creditor was Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Crassus saw in Caesar a potent political tool, a charismatic popularis who could challenge the power of his rivals in the Senate. He paid Caesar's debts, investing in his future, a gamble that would reshape the Republic. From a rising politician to a military commander in Hispania Ulterior, or further Spain, Caesar's hunger for glory was boundless. Appointed governor in 61 BC, he finally had command of legions. He was no longer just a politician borrowing money to win votes. He was a general with the power to wage war, win treasure, and earn the ultimate Roman prize, a triumph. He wasted no time. He led his legions on a swift and brutal campaign against the tribes of the mountainous interior, pushing Roman power to the shores of the Atlantic. It was here, on the rugged frontiers of the Republic, that Caesar the politician was forged into Caesar the general. He learned the art of command, the brutal calculus of logistics, and the visceral reality of the battlefield. He proved to be a brilliant and aggressive commander, leading from the front, inspiring his men with his own courage. More importantly, he learned how to win the absolute devotion of his soldiers. He shared their hardships, ate the same rations, and marched alongside them. He knew their names and honored their bravery. This created a powerful bond, an intense personal loyalty that transcended the formal structures of the Republic. These men were not just fighting for Rome, they were fighting for Caesar. This loyalty would become one of his greatest assets. His time in Spain was a resounding success. He had pacified the province, enriched his soldiers, and amassed enough personal wealth to finally pay off his colossal debts. Yet, it was also here that the true, terrifying scale of his ambition became clear. The historian Suetonius tells a story that while in Gades, modern-day Cadiz, Caesar came upon a statue of Alexander the Great. He stood before it for a long time, and then let out a heavy sigh, lamenting that at his age, Alexander had already conquered the known world, while he himself had yet to achieve anything of great note. The story, whether true or not, reveals the mind of a man who measured himself not against his Roman peers, but against the gods and heroes of history. Returning to Rome, Caesar wanted both a triumph for his victories and the right to stand for the consulship, Rome's highest office. His enemies in the Senate, the conservative faction known as the Azas, forced him to choose. A general awaiting a triumph could not enter the city, and a candidate for consul had to declare his candidacy in person. Blocked and humiliated, Caesar made a move that would shake Roman politics to its core. He approached the two most powerful men in Rome, his creditor, Crassus, and the great general, Pompey the Great, who was also being stonewalled by the Senate. Caesar proposed a secret pact, an informal alliance to pool their resources and bypass the Senate entirely. This was the first triumvirate. Together, their influence was unstoppable. Pompey had the legions and the loyalty of countless veterans. Crassus had the money, a seemingly infinite supply of it to fund campaigns and bribe officials. And Caesar had the popular support and the political savvy to drive their shared agenda. It was a conspiracy against the state, a three-headed monster designed to seize control of the Republic's machinery for their own personal gain. With their combined backing, Caesar easily won the consulship for 59 BC. His Optimate opponents managed to elect one of their own, Marcus Bibulus, as his co-consul, hoping to obstruct his every move. They underestimated Caesar's ruthlessness. When Bibulus tried to veto his legislation, Caesar's supporters used intimidation and mob violence to drive him from the forum. Bibulus was forced to retreat to his home for the rest of the year, claiming to be watching the heavens for bad omens, the only legal recourse he had left. For the rest of the year, Romans joked that it was the consulship of Julius and Caesar. He was running the state as a sole ruler, demonstrating that the will of one powerful man could now outweigh the entire legal structure of the republic. As his year as consul ended, Caesar knew his enemies would prosecute him for his high-handed and illegal actions. His salvation, secured through the triumvirate, was a 5-year proconsular command over the provinces of Cisalpine Gaul, Transalpine Gaul, and Illyricum. It gave him immunity from prosecution and, crucially, command of 4 legions. Now he was leaving Rome, not in defeat, but to forge an army, win unimaginable glory, and build the power base and the legend that would allow him to one day return and claim it all. The stage was set for the conquest of Gaul, a campaign that would make Caesar a household name and push the Republic ever closer to its final bloody collapse. In 58 BC, Julius Caesar arrived in Gaul as proconsul. To the Romans, it was a vast, untamed wilderness, a patchwork of hundreds of fiercely independent and warlike tribes. To Caesar, it was an opportunity, a chance to forge a military reputation, a loyal army, and the power to rival his great contemporary, Pompey. Here, in the forests and fields of Gaul, he would become immortal. For 8 grueling years, he fought. The campaign began under the pretext of halting the migration of the Helvetii tribe, but it soon spiraled into a full-scale conquest. Caesar pushed his legions relentlessly, campaigning even through the harsh Gallic winters when armies were expected to rest. He was always on the move, a master of speed and surprise, appearing where least expected, forcing his enemies to fight on his terms. But Caesar's genius was not confined to the battlefield. He was a master engineer. To intimidate the Germanic tribes, his legions built a massive wooden bridge across the Rhine River in just 10 days, a feat of logistics that struck awe and terror into his foes. He then did the unthinkable, twice leading expeditions across the treacherous English Channel into the mythical land of Britain, a place most Romans considered the very edge of the world. These were not just military actions, they were powerful acts of political theater, broadcast to a captivated audience back in Rome. The war was brutal, a systematic subjugation. Entire tribes were wiped out. Villages were burned to the ground. At the Battle of the Sambre, Caesar's legions were nearly annihilated in a surprise attack, a near disaster that he turned into a desperate victory. The cost in human life was staggering, with some ancient sources claiming over 1 million Gauls were killed and another 1 million enslaved. And through it all, Caesar crafted his own legend. Each night in his tent he wrote his commentaries on the Gallic War. Presented as a factual third-person account, it was in reality a masterpiece of political propaganda designed to justify his actions, magnify his victories, and cement his image as Rome's indispensable man. He wrote the words that would outlive empires. But in the winter of 52 BC, the unthinkable happened. After years of Roman divide-and-conquer tactics, the tribes of Gaul united under a single, brilliant leader, Vercingetorix of the Arverni. Vercingetorix's plan was bold and brutal, a scorched earth policy. He would burn his own people's towns and farms, denying the Roman legions food and forage, hoping to starve them out and break their will. For the first time, Caesar was consistently on the defensive, even suffering a rare and humiliating defeat at the siege of Gergovia. The final confrontation came at the hill fort of Alesia. Vercingetorix and his 80,000 warriors were trapped inside. Caesar, faced with an impossible situation, responded with a breathtaking display of military engineering. He ordered his men to build a massive 11-mile wall of fortifications around the fort to besiege the Gauls within. But knowing a massive Gallic relief army was coming, he then ordered a second outer wall built, 13 miles long, to protect his own army from being attacked from the rear. He was besieging an army while preparing to be besieged himself. When the relief force of 250,000 Gauls arrived, the final, apocalyptic battle began. Caesar's men were caught between two enormous armies, fighting for their lives on two fronts simultaneously. The Roman lines buckled and nearly broke. In the most critical moment, Caesar, conspicuous in his bright red cloak, rode along the ramparts, rallying his exhausted men, plugging gaps, and personally leading desperate countercharges. His presence turned the tide. The Gallic relief army shattered and fled. Seeing his last hope destroyed, Vercingetorix surrendered in a dramatic ceremony, throwing his weapons at Caesar's feet. The Great Revolt was over. After 8 years of bloodshed, Gaul was conquered. But in the process, Caesar had created something far more dangerous to the political order in Rome: a hardened veteran army of 10 legions, loyal not to the Senate, but to him and him alone. The man who had conquered Gaul was now too powerful for the Republic to contain. When Rome demanded his surrender, he chose defiance. To disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen would mean leaving himself defenseless before his political enemies. On one cold night, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River.
And Rome's fate changed forever. Alea jacta est, the die is cast.
With that, he spurred his horse forward. His soldiers followed without hesitation. The shock and disbelief quickly turned to sheer panic. Pompey decided to abandon the city, his forces retreating. As he advanced, he met almost no resistance. Town after town opened their gates. In just 60 days, without fighting a single major battle, Caesar had made himself the undisputed master of all of Italy. After years of brutal civil war across the Roman world, Caesar returned to Rome, the undisputed master of the Roman state. He rebuilt Rome, reformed its calendar, and declared himself dictator for life. The republic he saved began to fear him more than its enemies. But among the old aristocracy, there was growing fear and resentment. Whispers began to circulate in the shadowed corners of the Senate House. They spoke of duty. They spoke of liberty. They spoke of tyrannicide. The scene confirmed his opponent's worst fears. It was no longer if he wanted to be king, but when. They struck not just at a man, but at an idea.
Caesar, the Ides of March have come, soothsayer. I, Caesar, but not gone.
Then the rest of the assassins surged forward, a frenzy of stabbing blades. Seeing Brutus among his killers, Caesar's will to fight seemed to drain away. And with his blood, the Republic truly died. The vacuum left by Caesar's death was not filled by a restored Republic. It was filled by even more chaos and another, more brutal round of civil war. From the ashes of that final conflict, one man would emerge, ruling as Rome's first emperor, Augustus. Julius Caesar, the man who ended a republic and gave birth to an empire. Subscribe for more legendary stories, only on Shadows of History.